So, now you have the framework. We have a final 7 years coming. We have a 10-nation confederation that will galvanize and unify under an individual that is known as the Antichrist. Now, go with me, if you would, to Ezekiel chapter 38. Here it is crucial to be able to identify the Antichrist and who is the coalition of nations that are with him. Because this is very significant. If we can identify that the Antichrist is being spoken of here in Ezekiel chapter 38 in this prophecy, it tells us specifically who is coming with him to attack Israel at the end. We have a list of nations in Ezekiel chapter 38 that tells us. This all becomes significant because pretty soon we're going to be touching on identifying Mystery Babylon. Who is this great city? Ezekiel 38. And the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, this is the Antichrist, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I am against thee, O Gog, chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth, and all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. Listen, Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Gomer and all his bands, the house of Togarmah of the north quarters. Of the north quarters. It says, After many days thou shalt be visited. In the latter years thou shalt come into the land that is brought back from the sword and is gathered out of many people against the mountains of Israel. This is a description. This is a description of Gog, the Antichrist. The nations that are with him, that are aligned with him, that are part of that 10-nation confederation that he'll be ruling over. And it tells us that he will come up against the mountains of Israel to destroy the land of Israel, to dominate the Jewish people. Everything that we're told that the Antichrist will do at the end of the age. This is a description of it right here. So, can we understand from what's being said in Ezekiel 38 who the main players are? Because this is significant. It's so important to understand. Gog, from the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. Now, through the years, there have been many who said, oh, this is talking about Russia. Because we have these words in here. He's the chief prince. In other passages, he's the chief prince of Rosh. Well, Rosh means head. But some people read Rosh and they said, oh, see, Rosh is Russia. And then they saw Meshech, and they said, oh, Meshech, Moscow. Just from the English words. These are tribal names from individuals who we know lived historically in the land of Turkey. Meshech, Tubal. And then it says Persia. Where is Persia? Iran. Ethiopia. Now, Ethiopia of then is Sudan of today. Okay, it's near the southern border of Egypt. Sudan. And Libya with them. Gomer and Togarmah, also in parts of Turkey. So here's what you have, and I need you to put on your geography hats, if you would. Think of Israel in the center. To the north and northeast. North is Turkey. Moving across, you have Iran. You have Syria. That whole region north of Israel, which is the hot spot today in the world. Those nations will all be aligned with Gog. And Gog is the head of them, most likely from the region of Assyria, the ancient Assyrian Empire, which would include parts of Turkey, parts of northern Syria, parts of northern Iraq. So the individual that will arise at the end, Gog, or the Antichrist, he will have a coalition of nations from that region, also included, now go to the south of Israel, to the area of Egypt, and just to the west of Egypt is Libya, to the south of Egypt, Ethiopia, Sudan. So they will be converging together against the land of Israel. Now I want to ask you a question. Does that portend a Roman Antichrist? Are the nations described in Ezekiel chapter 38, and you can go more into 39, are they Western European? No. These are all Middle Eastern nations and all Islamic. All of them are Islamic nations. So, what we have is an identification of the nations, the people groups, that will be aligned with the Antichrist under his dominion, where they are from, and what they will do in that last 7-year period of human history. Now, go with me, if you would, back to the book of Revelation. I'm going to just read some of this. We have to read it because the descriptions are there. The best way to communicate it to you is really to read it together. Revelation 17, verse 1. And there came one of the 7 angels, which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. That, when it says upon many waters, what it really means is upon nations and peoples, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. There's the 10 horns again. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color. Now, the beast, did you notice the color of the beast? The beast was scarlet. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet. These two go together. The woman and the beast work together. They're part of a team. They have synergy together. And decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration, not because he was impressed by how beautiful, but the shock and the astonishment of what he saw. And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath the 7 heads and 10 horns. This is why I took you all the way back to Daniel 9, to Daniel 2, to Daniel 7, to Ezekiel. These two individuals, or these two, go together, the woman and the beast. The woman, the harlot of Revelation 17, she rides the beast. In a certain sense, the beast carries her along. And who is the beast? It's 10-nation confederation of nations at the end. So this 10-nation confederation of nations under the Antichrist, the beast, is carrying her along. But she also rides the beast, and to a large degree, she has control over the beast, as a rider would on a horse. The two work together synergistically. So here's the point. If we can determine the beast identity, which we've just talked to, the 10 kings, Daniel chapter 2, you have the 10 toes in the vision of the Colossus. Daniel chapter 7, the 10 horns on the beast. Revelation 17, we're told that the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast, the individual, the Antichrist who rules over them. We have the identity from Ezekiel 38 of who the nations are. They're Islamic nations. Now, that identifies the beast, this 10-nation confederation of kings from the Middle East, all Islamic. If they work synergistically, and the beast carries the woman who's riding on top along, and the woman also rules over the beast, that should give us a very strong indicator of the identity of the woman who is riding upon the beast. Shake your heads if you understand what I'm saying. So if we're saying that the 10-nation confederation at the end of the age, under the Antichrist, if we're saying that those 10 nations are all from the Middle East and all Islamic, and the woman works synergistically with them, then they must have some kind of important connection. And I would submit to you that as you look at the beast, at the woman who rides the beast, that I would suggest to you that the identity of the woman is none other than Mecca in Arabia of today. Mecca in Arabia. Mecca is the fountainhead or source of the greatest perpetration of false religion on humanity that the world has ever known. The nations of the Middle East, and remember, this is a Jerusalem-centric, Israel-centric, Middle Eastern-centric book and series of prophecies. What is of importance is Daniel asked the question, back in Daniel chapter 9, what's going to happen to my people and the city of Jerusalem? And the answer comes, 77 weeks are determined. The first 483 is before the church age. Stops with the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, that first 483 years. The last 7 are at the end, and God is bringing to fruition everything that he has promised through the Old Testament prophets at the end. So are you with me? Okay. Mystery Babylon the Great, a wicked harlot who rides a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. And what I would submit to you is what we're looking at is a religious and an economic system, or city, you could say, or nation. Let's look at a more detailed description of this woman, Revelation chapter 18. And after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. And the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that you be not partakers of her sins, and that you receive not of her plagues. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. Remember her, even as she rewarded you, and double unto her, double according to her works, in the cup which she hath filled, fill full to her double. How much she hath glorified herself, and lived deliciously. So much torment and sorrow give her, for she saith in her heart, I sit as a queen. I am no widow, I shall see no sorrow. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire. For strong is the Lord God who judgeth her. And the kings of the earth, who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her, shall bewail her and lament for her when they shall see the smoke of her burning. Standing afar off, for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. Verse 11, And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her. For no man buyeth their merchandise any more. The merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones and of pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and fine wood and all manner vessels of ivory and all manner vessels of most precious wood and of brass and iron and marble. This is materialism 101 here. And cinnamon and odors, foods, spices, ointments, frankincense, wine, oil, fine flour, wheat, beasts, sheep, horses, chariots, slaves, and souls or bodies of men. And the fruits that thy soul lusted after are departed from thee, and all things which were dainty and goodly are departed from thee, and thou shalt find them no more at all. The merchants of these things, which were made rich by her, shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen, and purple and scarlet, and decked with gold and precious stones. For in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught. Listen to this. And every shipmaster, and all the company in ships, and sailors, and as many as trade by sea, stood afar off, and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What city is like unto this city? And they cast dust on their heads and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city, wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea by reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour is she made desolate. Quite a description. And the first time, and the second time, and the 5th time, and the 10th time, and the 20th time I read this passage, my mind said, it's New York. It's New York. Yeah. And I reread it, and I reread it, and I said, it's New York. And I will submit to you that if this is the only passage that you focus on in trying to identify the last days identity of mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, you may end up in New York. And I would submit to you that you're on the wrong continent. Because the description, when you're talking about materialism and the ships and so much, you say, oh, it's got to be New York. But I would submit to you when you dig into the Old Testament passages and you remember that the Word of God, specifically these passages, are referring to Jerusalem and Israel and the Middle East, you cannot possibly come away with the idea that Mystery Babylon is New York City or Washington or London or Beijing or Shanghai or Istanbul. There are some, and I would say this is probably my second favorite position on this, would say a rebuilt Babylon in what is today Iraq. But I would submit to you that I do not think that even that fits the criteria as perfectly as the identification of Mecca and Saudi Arabia does today. We're going to get into that a little bit further here in just a moment. So the woman who rides the beast, a counterfeit religious system of Islam, and I would also group in with that a financial and economic system as well, birthed and thriving in Arabia. So for a few moments, let's get into the geopolitical realm and let's take a look at what's going on in Saudi Arabia. You may be surprised. This is the Arabian Peninsula. At the southern end, which is right here, is the country of Yemen. Over here is the country of Oman. This is the Persian Gulf, right here. This is Iran, right over in here. This little peninsula right here is Qatar, Q-A-T-A-R. And I told you last week, by the way, that there's a very, very large natural gas deposit in the center of the Persian Gulf right here. And Qatar and Saudi Arabia share it with Iran. And both are trying to run natural gas pipelines through, you guessed it, Syria, right over in here. And both pipelines cross in that location. And that is one of the main reasons why you have so much going on, the fight, a proxy war that's taking place in Syria. And of course, Russia, way up to the north, also controls a large deposit of natural gas, and they're the ones that are sending most of the natural gas to Europe. This is the natural gas reserve. Iran wants to run their, this is kind of a little bit of a skewed map, but they want to run their pipeline up here and through Iraq, through northern Iraq, through Syria, over to Lebanon, and from there they may liquefy it and send it on ships across the Mediterranean to Europe. And then in Qatar, they also share. They want to come through Saudi Arabia and then through Jordan, and then again right through Syria. And they cross between two major cities of Damascus and Aleppo, which are in the news constantly. There were just chemical attacks there. There are lots of refugees coming out of there. It's a tragic situation. That is one of the main reasons. And that's why Russia swooped in, incidentally. You say, where did Russia come into all of this? Well, Russia already had a warm water port in Syria. But Russia is also a major supplier of natural gas to Europe. So Russia didn't like the idea of two competing natural gas pipelines, one from Iran and one from Qatar, going through Syria and off to Europe, which would cut into its monopoly on supplying natural gas to Europe. So that's kind of a side note. But I want to call your attention here to the geography. Sometimes Arabia is called the desert of the seas. And there's actually an Old Testament passage, which I'll point out to you in a few moments, the desert of the seas. You can see this huge desert area. Of course, Israel is right up in here. You can see a small rift. This is the Sea of Galilee that comes down the Jordan River to the Dead Sea. And then you have the Sinai Peninsula right here. And then this is the Red Sea here. It comes down and it drains into this area, the Arabian Sea. Of course, the Persian Gulf over here where all the oil is. Comes through the Straits of Hormuz right here and then out as well. Arabia is uniquely positioned in the world. It's a giant sandbox though. And what's amazing is from a giant sandbox in the 1930s, oil is discovered. And it completely transformed what looked like a wasteland into something that is going to amaze you when I show you some of the things that are going on in Saudi Arabia today. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of the lay of the land, and later we'll point out to you Mecca is in this area. The capital city of Riyadh is located right here. You see this impression in the center. Riyadh is right in that area. But most of what we're going to be focused on is over here on the coast of the Red Sea. This is called the Kaaba, K-A-A-B-A. How many of you are familiar with it? Just a few of you. How many of you have seen it before in pictures? Okay, so a lot of you have never seen it. This is in Mecca. Just to give you an idea, this is the center religious focal point of Islam worldwide. This is where they pray to in Mecca, the Kaaba. It is a black building or box which actually is covered with a black fabric and gold filigree around it, which speaks of Allah and how great He is in some of the wording that you see around it. But this is in the center and next to the largest mosque in the world, and this is in the central part of Mecca in Saudi Arabia. This is where millions and millions of Muslims throughout the world will come to worship. It is one of the 5 pillars of Islam that one time, at least one time in your life, as a good Muslim, you'll make a trip called Hajj, H-A-J-J. You will come to this area and there's a series of things you must do when you come to visit this central location called the Kaaba in the center of Mecca. This is the largest religious cult on the face of the earth with hundreds and hundreds of millions of adherents, a false religious center. And I would submit to you, it is a counterfeit religious center, taking the worship that should be entitled and be given to the true Christ in Jerusalem to a false deity, and I would say in an ultimate sense, Satan, in this location. Now those sound like harsh words, but that's the reality of it and the tragedy of it. I want to talk to you just briefly about this Kaaba. This Kaaba is about 60 feet high, 60 feet wide. It is supposed to be or represent kind of an equivalent to the Holy of Holies in Jerusalem, in the temple in Jerusalem. It's the most equivalent that Islam has to the Holy of Holies. They believe that this Kaaba was smaller and it was given to Adam, and that Abraham, when he came, he built it and made it larger the way you see it today. Of course, there's no evidence for any of those things, but that's the Islamic tradition and that's in their writings. They also believe that it's the gateway to Allah, and that an exact replica of this is above in the heavens where Allah resides. This, they would believe, is the closest place they can get to their deity, Allah. Now, Muhammad died in 632 AD, but I want to make a few observations. Before Muhammad died, at this location, there were more than 360 pagan idols that were known to have been placed at this location. The tribesmen of Arabia would come and worship at this location. This was a place of idol worship. More than 360 idols were in this locale. When Muhammad came along, he was influenced by Christianity and Judaism and Hinduism and other religions of the world because he was a merchant at the crossroads where the merchants came by. He put together his own religious system, And he decided that he wanted to have one God, and he called him Allah. That was his God. So he supposedly cleansed this area of the other idols that were there. But I want to tell you that much of the idolatrous practice that was going on before Muhammad came on the scene still continues to this day. As a matter of fact, there are some scholars who believe that the origins of the Kaaba comes from the Hindu deity Shiva, which is known and seen to have a crescent moon on the top of its head and is known as the destroyer of the earth. Also, Muslims today, they will once a year put on a white robe and they will walk as part of the Hajj to visit, and they will circumambulate, which means they will go in a circle around the Kaaba as part of venerating their deity. That practice is done today in India in pagan circles, where they go to the deity, they circumambulate around the deity. The same practices are still in occurrence today. Also, the pagans before, the tribal pagan people of Arabia, they would put on white robes, and they would also come up to worship their idols that were at this location. Further, this cube, on the corner of the cube, and I don't have a picture, I wish I did, I apologize. At the corner of it, there's something called the black stone. The black stone. That black stone is surrounded by a silver framework, and I don't want to get too graphic except to say that it clearly is representative of a female sexual organ. And inside of that silver framework, you have this black stone. It was known in ancient times that pagan gods were created out of stone, and that many times there were black meteors that had fallen from the sky. They had taken those black meteors, carved a head, and put the head of the black meteor, carved like the god, on the marble statue. There are examples of this in Paphos in Cyprus today, the statue of Aphrodite. Even in Acts chapter 19, most likely there is a story that is from the book of, from Ephesus, the city of Ephesus, where the connection is also made, where they say, our god Diana, our goddess Diana, she has a head that is an image that fell from the sky. So this concept of a black meteor being carved into a god or a goddess was prevalent throughout the day. The black stone that is there on the corner of the Kaaba, there was an individual, now stick with me here, there was an individual called John of Damascus, not from the Bible, John of Damascus. He lived about 50 years after Muhammad. And he said, and we have a quote from him, he was a monk in Syria. He visited the Kaaba, and he said, when you go and you see the black stone at the Kaaba, which the Muslims kiss, touch, and rub during their veneration as they come during the Hajj, their pilgrimage there, that stone, if you look carefully, still had the engravings of a pagan goddess on it only 50 years after Muhammad's death. The black stone at the corner of the Kaaba, that today millions of Muslims come, circumambulate as part of the ritual, part of the veneration of their God, and kiss the black stone. As a matter of fact, in Islamic writings, that black stone was said to have been white when it first appeared. And that black stone, every time it's touched, it absorbs the sins of the individual that touches it. And that has made it as black as it is because of the millions that have come that have touched it, and it absorbs the sin into the stone, turned the white stone black. These are just some of the things that are going on in Islam today. And you should know that there are hundreds of millions of people that are 5 times a day turning and praying to this pagan idolatrous system. And it is absolutely tragic.